Let's talk about something that causes a lot of confusion and a lot of surprise when it comes to the VA disability back pay. I've heard from so many veterans who open their bank account one morning and they see a deposit from the VA, have no idea where it came from or how the amount was calculated, or maybe you get your decision letter and see the words effective date, retroactive pay, or withholding, and it all just kind of blends together into government speak, if you will. If you've ever wondered how did they come up with that number, you are not alone. I'm Sam Ross, founder of Claim Climbers, and today's episode is all about decoding back pay. I want to go over everything I wished I knew. We'll explore how it works, what an effective date actually is, why that date matters so much, and how all those numbers end up on your decision letter. Let's start at the beginning. Back pay is basically the VA's way of making sure you get the compensation you were owed for the time you spent waiting for a decision. The process isn't perfect, but it's designed to make things fair, so that if your claim took months or even years to be decided, you are paid for that lost time. But here's when things get tricky. The amount of back pay depends on a lot of factors. When you filed your claim, how long the process took, whether your rating changed along the way, if you had dependents, and even if you owed money to the VA or other agencies. The real key here is something called the effective date. That's the date the VA uses as a starting point for your benefits. In most cases, your effective date is the day you filed your claim, or sometimes the date you submitted on intent to file. But sometimes it's later, like if you've reopened a claim, submitted new evidence, or filed for an increase at a different time. The difference in just being a month can have a big impact on your back pay, especially at higher ratings. Let's use an example. Imagine you filed your claim on February 1st and the VA takes until November 1st to make a decision. If your claim is granted, your effective date is set as February 1st. You should receive 9 months of retroactive benefits, all paid at once. But if for any reason the effective date is set later, say April 1st, your back pay will only cover the months from April forward. That's why it's so important to look at the actual date listed on your decision letter. You'll usually see the effective date listed in a section that says something like, "We are paying you from," or "Your benefits are effective as of." Right next to that, the VA often includes a calculation of how your retroactive pay is made. That lump sum that covers the time between your effective date and the date your claim was granted. Now, here's another twist. If your rating was changed along the way, maybe you started at 30%, then got increased to 50%. After submitting new evidence, your back pay might be split into chunks. You'd get a certain amount for the months at 30%, then a higher rate for the months at 50%. Each change in rating comes with its own mini calculations, and sometimes the math gets a little dizzying, if you will. And what about withholdings? Sometimes the VA will hold back a portion of your back pay to cover things like prior overpayments, debts owed to the federal government, or sometimes attorney's fees if you had legal help. If your back pay deposit is less than what's shown in the letter, that's often the reason. It can be frustrating, but the VA is supposed to explain any deductions in your letter or on a separate notice. Let's touch on dependents. If you have a spouse, children, or other dependents, your monthly benefit and your back pay can be higher. But it only kicks in for the months where the VA has recognized those dependents. If your marital status changed during the claims process, or if you added or removed a dependent, your back pay might be adjusted to reflect those changes, and the timing can get even more complex. The language in these letters doesn't always make things easy. Words like retroactive award, effective date, and compensation adjustment are often thrown in without much explanation. That's why so many veterans end up feeling confused or even a little skeptical about whether the math is right. One thing I have noticed is that most veterans have at least one surprise deposit story. Maybe it's more than you expected, maybe it's less. The bottom line is, unless you know how your effective date was chosen and how your ratings change over time, it's tough to double check the VA's math. And honestly, you shouldn't have to be a mathematician or a lawyer just to understand your own benefits. So, let's sum up a few key points. Back pay is meant to cover the time you waited for a decision, starting from your effective date. Your effective date is usually the date you filed your claim, but it can change depending on new evidence, reopened claims, or increased ratings. The back pay amount is affected by your rating percentage, any changes in that rating, the number of dependents you had at different times, and any withholdings for debt or fees. The language in your decision letter can be confusing, but at the end of the day, it's all meant to make sure you're not shortchanged for the time you waited. If you ever find yourself wondering, is this amount correct? Did I get everything I was supposed to? Know that you are not alone. Every veteran I know has had those questions at least once that's been through this process. The system is complex and the process can feel impersonal, but Backpay is there to make things right, even if the math takes a few twists and turns. In our next episode, we'll break down how to read your VA decision letter, from what each rating means to understanding the terms like granted, denied, effective date, and what to expect if you disagree with the result. Thanks for being here, and thank you for your service. I'm Sam Ross. See you in episode 15.